The American Revolution began in 1775 as conflict between the 13 colonies in Great Britain. The colonists did not like the way that the British treated them. First, the British passed a series of laws that violated colonial rights, and then they sent an army to occupy colonial cities. A long series of events led to the start of the American Revolution.
The French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763 between Britain and France left Britain with a huge debt. The King and Parliament felt it fair that colonists pay part of the cost. They began plans to tax them. This outraged the colonists.
In 1763, the Treaty of Paris marked an end of France as a power in North America. The British raised the prices of their goods and would not pay the Native Americans for use of their land.
In 1763, the proclamation happened. To prevent more fighting, Britain called a halt to the settlers' westward expansion. The colonists were furious that Britain ignored their land claims.
In 1764, Parliament passed the Sugar Act, which raised revenue by increasing duties on sugar imported from the West Indies. This angered the colonists. This led to the cry of no taxation without representation.
In 1765, Parliament passed the Stamp Act law and the Everett to raise money. This law placed on tax on almost all printed material in the colonies, such as newspapers, pamphlets, and playing cards. All printed material had to have a stamp. This taxed colonists without their consent.
In 1767, Parliament passed a set of laws that came to be known as the Townshend Act. New taxes applied to imported goods with tax applied to the port of entry. The colonists were angered at any taxes Parliament passed.
In 1768, colonist protests made the British officials nervous. Parliament responded by sending troops to Boston. The British redcoats set up camp in the center of the city. The colonists hated this.
Relations between the redcoats and colonists grew tenser. The Boston Massacre happened on March 5, 1770, when a fight broke out between townspeople and soldiers. Redcoats fired shots, killing 5 colonists.
To save the British East India Company, Parliament passed the Tea Act of 1773. This gave the company the right to ship tea to the colonies without paying most of the taxes placed on tea. The colonists argue that this was another attempt to crush their liberty.
This led to the Boston Tea Party. 3 tea ships arrived in Boston Harbor in 1773. A group of colonists disguised as Mohawks boarded the ships at midnight and threw chests of tea overboard.
When King George II heard the news of the Boston Tea Party, he decided to punish Boston. The coercive acts closed Boston Harbor until the Massachusetts colonists paid for the ruined tea. Events such as the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party escalated the conflict into a revolution. What started as a fight for the colonists' rights ended as a fight for independence. The war brought the colonies together to defend their land and their freedoms. Here are some of the major battles of revolution.
In 1775, there was the Battle of Lexington and Concord. At dawn, the Redcoats approached Lexington and discovered 70 Minutemen. Both sides fired shots. 8 Minutemen were killed. British troops continued their march to Concord. The battle for American independence from Great Britain had begun.
On June 16, 1775, was the Battle of Bunker Hill. About 1,200 militiamen set up at Bunker Hill in Breed's Hall across the harbor from Boston. The next day, the Redcoats crossed the harbor and then charged up the hill. Americans opened fire, forcing the British to retreat. In the end, the Americans ran out of the gunpowder and had to withdraw. The British won the Battle of Bunker Hill but suffered heavy losses.
On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was drafted by Thomas Jefferson and approved by Congress. It explains why the colonists had to become independent of Britain and why people have the right to be free and seek happiness.
The colonies won the Battle of Saratoga in June of 1777. The British handed their weapons to the Americans. This war boosted the American spirit.
The Battle of Yorktown in 1781 was the last major battle of the American Revolution. French soldiers helped Americans attack British-occupied New York City. This was a victory for the French and American forces.
The Articles of Confederation was the first constitution of the 13 states that formed the United States of America. The Second Continental Congress approved them on November 15, 1777.
2 years after the Battle of Yorktown, the Treaty of Paris was signed on September 3, 1783, formally ending the American Revolution. Britain acknowledged the 13 colonies to be free and independent states. Americans had won their freedom and had to now build their country.
Why do we rebel? We rebel to fight for what we believe in, fight for independence, fight for freedom, religious freedom, and freedom of speech. The colonists rebelled because the British were treating them unfairly. History is full of people trying to rebel against government authority and their parents. They want to resist control or authority. For example, teenagers rebel because they feel controlled. They may rebel against rules by refusing to do homework, not sticking to a curfew, or ignoring house rules.
People rebel against government because they find their dictator corrupt or don't agree with their policy. People think that their rights are controlled and are willing to fight back like the colonists did.
By Sofia, Matza, and Matza-Phipps.